Hey everybody, welcome to Hashing It Out. I'm Jordan Mack. I'm a senior software here at the Nervos Foundation, and today I'm joined by two guests, which I am privileged to be introducing today. I'm going to do them from left to right as they are on my screen. So the first one is, and correct me if I get your name wrong, please, Marcel Kaiser, who's from business development at Polycrypt. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And then Norbert Dzikowski, who is one of the core developers at Polycrypt. Welcome to the show.
Also, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about the Perun payment channels on CKB. But this is a live show, so before we get into it, I got to mention the three things I mentioned every single show, which is number one, we're not going to be talking about the price today. There are plenty of places you can discuss the price. We're just not going to do it here today. There's not going to be also any discussion of future exchanges or anything of that confidential information nature. And all of the opinions that are discussed on this program today are of the individuals, not of the Nervos Foundation itself. So we're broadcasting live today on YouTube and Twitter. Most people like Twitter for whatever reason. I don't know why it is. It seems to be about 4 or 5 to 1. But if you want to participate in the chat room today, you need to be on YouTube. So if you want to ask any questions, definitely please jump over to YouTube. You can ask your questions at any point in the show, and we'll try to cycle through them and get to them if we have time at the end. So without further ado, let's get into it. So just to get started, maybe you guys could give us a little bit of a background about yourself. So Marcel, could you go first?
Yeah, sure. My name is Marcel Kaiser. I'm an economist. I've been formerly researching at the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center on DeFi and industrial applications of blockchain. And that was also the context I got to know, in which I got to know Polycrypt, the creators of the topic of today, Perun. And yeah, we wrote a paper together. And ever since then, I have been a business developer at Polycrypt.
Fantastic, fantastic. And Norbert, how about yourself?
So I studied computer science at TU Darmstadt, and I'm working for Polycrypt now, I guess, 2.5 years. I remember getting interested in blockchain, and at first it was Ethereum. I dabbled into the technicalities and thought to myself, okay, it looks kind of interesting. I tried to find a job in that space, and Polycrypt was what came up. And I'm pretty happy I was able to get somehow into deep tech for blockchain.
Yeah, and definitely deep this is. So let's talk a little bit about Polycrypt, the company. Can you tell us just briefly who some of the main team members are?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Polycrypt is a spin-off of the Technical University of Darmstadt, and it is, it is mostly made up of former members of the Applied Cryptography Research Group there. We are still in very close cooperation with them. The team has quite the extensive experience in cryptography, DLT research, software development, etc. I think we've gathered some experience also in working with IoT companies, blockchain foundations like yours, and who are the main team members? I mean, we are all main team members since we are only 10 people. So, as I said, we're
Right.
mostly scientific background or research background. A few economists like me here and there, but the majority is developers and cryptographers.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the way to do it. So how did Polycrypt form? How did it come together and somebody decide to do this company?
Yeah, it's actually a fantastic question because I think in our case, it's not like most companies start. It all started in, I think, 2017 with a research project which dealt with virtual payment hubs over cryptocurrencies at the Technical University of Darmstadt. And the research project was titled Perun, which is also an homage, and I know we'll talk about that later maybe, to the Lightning Network, because Perun is the god of thunder in, I think, Germanic etymology. But don't pin me down on that. I'm not an expert on that. In this research project, we cooperated with, I think, another university in Poland. And we designed the Perun payment channel framework. And then when that project was finished, we decided to create a spin-off, essentially to see where we can go with this framework. We wanted to continue this project essentially, but not on a research basis, but rather, as a company. And we've found great support. We've been supported by the German Office for Research and I think you translated research and how would you say it? Research and education, basically. And ever since then, as I said, we've been working with some IoT companies and blockchain ecosystems.
Right. So from humble beginnings as just a startup, and you decided to continue that. No, that's a great way to get started. It shows that it wasn't just a self directed efforts towards money exclusively. It actually started with a real solid foundation, which is great. Let's talk about the actual product a little bit, the Perun product. So it is a payment channel. Now, could you give us just the very basics of what is a payment channel to you guys, for our audience? And so high level is kind of best on this one.
So basically a payment channel allows two parties to exchange an arbitrary amount of transactions between each other. And the key point is that all of those transactions that happen between both parties are executed off-chain, which means they do not have to be validated by the ledger they are meant for, but rather stay in the channel. And you only have a commitment that has to be submitted on-chain in the beginning, and in the end, a submission phase where the final balances are told to layer one, and basically it gets redistributed according to the latest channel state.
Right. So it is a layer 2 convention, and correct me if I get any of this wrong, but it is basically you open a channel with a single party, and you guys can go back and forth with as many transactions as you want. You can do 100,000 if you want to, going back and forth with your money, and then at the very end, you settle it back to the main blockchain on layer 1. Did I get all that right?
Exactly.
Right. So it's a pretty simple concept. Of course, there's all kinds of little nuances once you get into the details of how do you actually keep this secure, and how do you utilize the security from layer 1 to actually make this blockchain or make this layer 2 convention safe for everybody. Because a layer 2 network like this does not work without a blockchain. Am I correct in that? This is not standalone. It requires the blockchain. Yes. So I think that one important thing to mention is that if there's ever a discrepancy and the two parties disagree, that's when the blockchain really comes in. It settles the arguments. It's kind of like the judge there in determining what is actually going on here. Let's talk about channels just in general. Payment channels, why are these so important to where the future of decentralized finance and blockchain?
As is most likely known, blockchains themselves, due to their security, are rather slow to execute transactions, or in essence, their throughput is rather low, especially if one considers that the whole world wants to rely on layer 1 at the same time for an arbitrary amount of transactions. And what we can do with channels then is to lift most of the transactions that happen between users in this layer 2 and only go to layer 1, as you said, if there is some dispute that has to be settled, which basically enables scalability.
Yeah, I think we're building the infrastructure of tomorrow, not only for traditional payments or banking or anything like that, for finance, but also for lots of other applications, which I'm sure we'll get into later on. And we kind of have the premise of transact off-chain, argue or dispute on-chain, really use that technology efficiently, because you always have a trade-off between decentrality, security, and scalability. And currently, the way many blockchains operate, they have to sacrifice scalability to a certain extent, and that's absolutely fine. But we are trying to build a solution to still make the blockchains of the world the powerful tool that they aspire to be with the Perun solution.
Right. Yeah, we've talked about this in past episodes of Hashing It Out. Decentralization is very slow and it's very expensive when you're talking about real decentralization. If you're talking about a centralized chain masquerading and saying that they are decentralized, yes, they can go very, very fast, but that's not really the real deal. Nervos does not sacrifice any security or decentralization. That's one of the challenges that we have then, is because we have to, for scalabilities, we need other layer 2 solutions, which is why Nervos by its design is developed for layer 2s. We are a multi-layer ecosystem, and that's why it's so important that we have things like Perun in our ecosystem, because they really have that scalability that can take us into mass adoption in the future. So let's continue to talk a little bit about just scalability. Now, I know this is the loaded question for the industry, right? Which is, what is the TPS, right? This is a question you ask one blockchain, they say one answer, but it doesn't mean the same thing as another blockchain because of the different levels of decentralization. But we have to ask it anyway, because that's what all people want to know. So when we say with Perun, what can we say with the TPS?
So within a channel, and theoretically speaking, in an idealized communication network, you can have thousands of transactions per second between two users. So it's pretty fast and basically limited by either the delay the participants have when they have to exchange the updates with each other, and or the final signing of the state updates that you have. So basically, you can go as fast as either your processor allows or the network you're on. And by
Right,
that I
and
mean,
that's so potentially thousands of transactions per second within a single channel, right? That's right. And how many channels can you have?
you can have an arbitrary amount of channels. So it's not that Perun is limited to a certain amount that is established on layer 1. So in essence, we could scale a chain infinitely.
Yeah, basically infinitely. So if you had 1,000 users, each doing 1,000 transactions per second, that'd be easily 1 million. And this is why I said at the beginning, this is kind of a loaded question, is because it doesn't really even apply here. We're talking about a layer 2 convention with theoretically unlimited capability. But we had to ask it anyway. So anyway, let's keep going. Because this is starting to get interesting. So Perun payment channels, how are they different from Bitcoin's Lightning Network, which we've all heard of that. We know that they are running that right now. So some success, some not successful things on that. But anyway, how is this different than that?
So at first, the main distinguishing point between Perun and the Lightning Network is that Perun is chain agnostic. So Bitcoin's Lightning Network is, of course, only available on Bitcoin. And in that sense, also had to get kind of creative in how they even achieve their channel opening and lifetime with HTLC time locks, which we don't have to do with Perun, since the chains we target are required to be able to execute the validation logic for the channels themselves. We can go into more detail later. But this enables us to support multiple chains and also give developers way more power in what they can do with the channels, because we are not only limited to payment channels with Perun.
Right. So in its core, is Perun today, is it technically a payment channel, or is it actually a state channel that's handling payments?
It's a state channel.
Okay, so it is actually a state channel by default. So with Bitcoin's Lightning Network, you mentioned that they have certain difficulties with opening channels. Is that due to basically the complete lack of smart contracts that they have? Is that the basis for it?
That's the basis, yeah.
Yeah, very difficult to work with, yeah.
Very difficult. On the other hand, pretty impressive on what they were able to achieve with what they had.
Well, yeah, of course. You can't knock somebody for being first. It's of course Bitcoin was genius for its time, but I like to think that in the last decade or so we have made some progress on
Uh-oh.
that front. So anyway, yeah, that's why smart contract platforms are, of course, what I support, what I choose to work with as well. As a developer, speaking as a developer myself, I very, very much prefer to work with something that has real native Turing complete smart contracts. But let's continue to move on a little bit. Can one of you tell us a little bit about some of the unique features of Perun?
So I will add to what I said before. Since we are blockchain agnostic and are able to support multiple blockchains, we are also capable of allowing you to create channels between blockchains. So you could imagine a chain or a channel that is opened between CKB and blockchain of your liking, as long as Perun has a backend support for it, which is nice.
Right. So right. So just in theory, we could in the future we'll be able to open. I'd be able to open a channel with you, let's say on the Ethereum network, but we're connected directly to the CKB network, and we'd be able to do again the back and forth transaction, thousands of transactions per second, cross chain in this case. Is that right?
That is correct, and
All
we
right.
won't even notice a difference. So
Mhm.
when we use it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And can you tell me a little bit about the process of developing this whole thing? You mentioned academia at first. Is this a peer-reviewed um, project, and how did that come about?
Yeah, so initially, as Marcel said, it was a research project. At first, there were the Perun papers, which pinpointed down the whole theory. Those papers were peer-reviewed, and there were a couple succession papers that also received peer reviews and extended the capabilities. What we then had to do was to somehow use all the theory and build a fundament and code, which we tried to stick as good as we could to the blockchain agnosticity of Perun. So,
And I think Norbert's answer here really displays our ethic a little bit. Really modest, really provably secure. Don't release anything too early. Just make sure it works. Make sure it works efficiently, and then of course make sure it's unbreakable. And that is of course like the ethos that was instilled because we cooperated so much with research. Yeah, there's I think multiple papers. I'm not exactly sure. I think multiple papers on Perun that really yeah explain why and how it is secure. That's also like the angle we really come from, especially if we speak about topics like cross chain. Any cross-chain application. I'm sure a lot of viewers kind of shrieked when we said cross-chain or when they thought about a bridge, because lately a lot of things have been going wrong with these. But this was one of the motivations where we said, hey, we have this really powerful trustless tool, and we think we can use it for interoperability as well. And we are currently proving that. Yeah, and we hope we can continue to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, during the last bull cycle, we saw some of the biggest bridge hacks in all of history that occurred, just due to, unfortunately, developer error. But it hurts. It hurts all of us, regardless of what chain that happens on. And this is something that we absolutely need to put a stop to. And there's better techniques now. There are better bridge techniques. I mean, this is part of the reason that Nervos had Force Bridge 1.0, our community is familiar with, and they were looking forward to all these new bridges, and it's kind of stopped, and they were like, what's going on? And it's because we decided that we had to reinvestigate that. We had to go directly to Force Bridge 2. And of course, we want to investigate other solutions as well. Perun's solution here for cross-chain channels is a different beast, but it does a lot of the same types of things that we're talking about. Basically, exchanging tokens across between two parties on two different networks. That's for intents and purposes, that is the exact same thing as a bridge, but much more secure, much more risk mitigation there, because there isn't one giant pot of funds that somebody can steal. So let's continue to move on. What is the difference between a payment channel, an app channel, and a cross-chain channel? And this is all, I took this straight off your website, so you're going to have to explain it to us.
Yeah, I think this is it's a fantastic question. I mean, we hoped that these titles are kind of self-explanatory, but still, we already established payment channels, right? You, Jordan, and we open up a channel, we transact value. I mean, it doesn't have to be like the same token or just one token type or whatever, but only value between only you and me, right? That's like the most basic Perun implementation that we currently have as a payment channel. Then in an app channel, and as I said, I hope that was kind of self-explanatory. You can, in theory, run apps. We have a few test implementations where we actually run games within Perun channels, in which we use Perun channels instead of the regular blockchain for latency reasons. You see, as Norbert said, the scalability of Perun is currently limited by its latency. But the flip side of that coin is that you actually get the latency you have to a different person as well in a Perun channel. With, of course, a few technical tweaks and details that are basically dictating it's not exactly the latency that you have to any server, I don't know, from Google or whatever, but it's really low. So in an app channel, you can execute arbitrary logic. And that makes app channels, for example, also very interesting for a little bit more complex applications. If we speak about machine-to-machine payments, and a machine also has to have a decision process of any kind, or there's a shared process between machines, for example, or also between humans. It doesn't really matter who's running a channel or who's opening or closing a channel. Yeah, they can execute logic within a channel, within an app channel. And we already mentioned cross-chain channels. Cross-chain channels are basically the connectors between different ecosystems, where you can move, as you already said, value, but also information. For example, in the form of verifiable credentials. We're also a little bit in that in the area of decentralized identity. Yeah, and so Perun, and it's kind of still the same animal, right? So it doesn't mean that if we implement anywhere, I don't know, an app channel, that it cannot do the payment channel. These are essentially levels that add on top of each other, right, Norbert?
Yes. I would like to add one thing to that, because this is something we realized when we work with CKB, since the whole methodology of CKB is a clear separation between the execution layer and the validation layer. And with app channels, we basically have the same split, like the off-chain part where users update their state depending on the channel logic or the app logic they have, is basically execution. And the only thing that we have to somehow make available on layer one is the validation for this app transition that we want to finalize on the chain in case of a dispute.
Right. So yeah, with validation and generation, we make that distinction because sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes there are cases where validation takes a lot less processing power than the actual generation. I think the most common example in our industry is, of course, proof of work mining, where it takes, on the Bitcoin network, which is the largest network, takes millions of computers all cranking away to find a single solution, which can be verified in a fraction of a second by a very, very weak computer. It takes almost no computing power to verify the proof of work that was actually completed. So it's that difference, that asymmetrical difference that we try to take advantage of on CKB. And like I said, it doesn't always work for every single case, but there are some unique cases sometimes where all of a sudden it really, really works very well. So when we say app channel, and I would just want to back up for 1 second with app channel, this is actually putting the logic itself on the chain like a smart contract, right? This isn't just describing a DApp using the channels. You're talking about, is the logic itself actually executing in the channel?
So the logic itself is executing in the channel, but when or only if you really, really have to go on chain because of a dispute, you have to make the validation logic available to layer 1. So in the best case, where both parties are honest, it might not even be necessary that the code itself was already deployed on chain. So you would have, in the worst case, the assurance, okay, I can get honest execution and force progression or a force move of the channel, but I don't have to. And if we are honest, we can utilize layer 1 without really having to use layer 1 in the worst case, which is pretty nice. But yeah, so it's not really that the whole app that is executed within the channel lives on the chain. It's only the validation part of it, if it has to be on the chain.
Right. I see. Okay, so let's talk about, to the average user, some of what we've just been talking about has probably been a little bit confusing. What are they actually going to see? Let's start with payment channels. How is an average user going to use a payment channel in the future?
Yeah, this question kind of has two answers, because in theory, and this is probably theory because we are speaking about the average user here, but in theory, already any of the people on CKB can open up a payment channel. However, and that's the big however, they would have to be quite well versed in what they are doing in development. Why? Because we built Perun currently, or at least we made Perun available currently in a way that is optimized for those kinds of users who want to build using Perun channels. We can of course go ahead, and I think this already exists in some way also, and say, you know what, we're leveraging all of the great tech we have, and just kind of there's a D app, there's a platform, go ahead, build some payment channels, or potentially even payment channel networks, or app channel networks for that matter, and do something with it. But that would quickly become something that would be mainly used for payments, simply for the reason that the average user is probably not able to simply run any game, whatever they want, in a Perun channel with someone else. So who are we talking about here? Perun is currently made available for those, as I said, who want to build blockchain applications, who maybe want to have an interface from their local not so blockchain application to the blockchain, who want to make, for example, blockchain payments available to their not so much blockchain using communities. So we are in a position where we said, okay, we first make that available to builders, who also help us in realizing the vision of making all of these interactions that we just so complicatedly explained available to everyone. And that's basically the core answer to the question. Optimally, the average user, when they will be using a channel, will not even notice that they are using a channel. It will be, it can be very, very seamless, very, very easy. And the beautiful thing about that would also be that they can, due to the modularity and all the properties that Norbert described, that they don't even notice the switch whether they are using currently an app channel, a cross-chain channel, a payment channel, because they are built in applications, or what they enable applications to do is to make all of their transactions really look simple and smooth and easy. And that's actually where we wanna go. We want to build and help to build applications that make all of this very complex cryptographic technology very, very invisible and great for user experience, because we witness that this is also something that's currently lacking in many ecosystems.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this falls exactly in line with what we've been trying to do with Nervos as well. That's been our vision, to enable blockchains to be simple and easy to use, and we do that through flexibility on our platform. We want to make sure that the average user is not concerned with really even the blockchain. They shouldn't even have to know that they're using Nervos CKB at the base layer. Ideally, they should just know that they're interacting with their favorite DApp and interacting with other users. So we absolutely share that common vision, which is great because we have a common goal in that regard. And I understand that you're describing the current state of it, which is, yes, the first step is always we have to get it to developers. We have to get it out there, get it in the hands of developers, and let them take the next step to build something. But we got to give them, the people who are listening today, some examples of what they can build. What are some things that developers could have the choice to build in the future with this type of a technology?
Yeah, fantastic question. If I may add one thing, just for the developers out there, Nervos actually does a great job, because Norbert is very modest here, but our developers really loved working with Nervos because everything worked so finely. So a big shout out to you guys. And now to the question, what will be built using Perun channels? So as I already mentioned a little bit, we had a lot of different use cases in several fields. We already mentioned interoperability, as we said, moving value from one blockchain ecosystem to another in and of itself is already a product that we might launch ourselves, that we, however, are always looking for corporations for. Then I already mentioned ultra low latency applications, for example, gaming. We've had I already said that we had a proof of concept or a demonstrator where we actually ran games in that. We had a project that sadly didn't come into fruition, not because of any technical reasons, can't get into that sadly right now, but where someone actually wanted to run blockchain-based games in a Perun channel. We have, of course, and that's an issue that we haven't touched upon really yet, the entire sector of payments and micro payment networks and all of this. I already touched upon IoT. Perun channels support offline payments in a way that not the entire machine fleet has to be online all the time. If they design it correctly, they only have to have one node that has to be online, and then they can connect an entire fleet using Perun channels. And not even machine-to-machine payments. Not only that, also machine-to-machine steering and coordination is a use case that we already touched upon with a big German industry partner. I already touched upon identity. We can perform trust-free credential swaps or credential payments within Perun channels. And this is just off the top of my head, because we've had like requests from all of these areas, and we tested all of the mentioned ones, and they actually work. So I hope that I made your listeners out there a little bit creative in what they want to build, and if scalability or interoperability or connecting their devices and worrying about that some client is too heavyweight for a tiny device or anything. If that's a worry, reach out to us, because we've dealt with all of that. We are already on embedded devices. So we are ready to build like the true interoperable everything payment, everything exchange machine. I came up with that. That's not a Polycrypt slogan. That was just out of my hip.
Yeah, so that was an extensive list there. But I want to dive a little bit. I'm going to explain a couple of the other uses that I think it could apply to, and correct me if I'm wrong. But absolutely, bridging. You're talking about bridging, and you're talking about more or less instantaneous bridging, which is really a beautiful part of it. And I think that an important part of that, which really helps us on personally on Nervos, is we have a layer 2, Godwoken, our EVM based layer 2, which has an exit delay of I forget what it is. I believe it's 3 days now. I could be wrong on that, but this has been one thing that users were definitely not too thrilled about. I mean, it's required for security reasons. That's just the way that a roll-up works. We have to have that delay in there so that it can remain secure. But of course, people don't really like it. It's inconvenient. So could Perun actually bridge layer 1 and layer 2 of our own network and enable those types of fast transfers?
Yes, definitely. That was actually like the initial motivation for our interoperability solution. The first step was a layer 1, layer 2 bridge. Back then, I think on the Ethereum network. But for the extended solution, I think Norbert, you just wanted to say something as well.
You basically answered already. So yeah, Perun could help with that. Just I don't know. Now I have to get a little bit technical in an opposing question. It also always depends on how you want to utilize the funds in the end. So I mean, having them in a channel and available in a channel network in the far future, for instance, would basically alleviate all the problems we have in that case. So it would be more or less instant. But trying to get all your funds out in the end of the day will always somehow incorporate some kind of delay that is dependent on the base layer you're on, just to make that clear.
Right. Opening and closing channels. Yes, there's always a little bit of a delay there. Fortunately for Nervos users, it's a little bit quicker. On Bitcoin, they have a 10-minute block to open a channel, and it's usually very full. Nervos right now is not full, and we can generally it's a 15 seconds or less blocks, so it's relatively quick to be able to open a new channel. And there is actually one thing we should back up and touch on a little bit. And Norbert, you can probably give us a little bit of an introduction to this, which is the virtual channels. Is that the right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tell us what that is, because that when I was going through it, that was very interesting to me. It's a little technical, but I think it's worth mentioning here.
So, I mean, it's fitting that we are 3 people now. Basically, what we enable with virtual channels is to bridge a channel between Marcel and me. If both of us have a channel open on layer 1 with you. So this is in essence what the virtual channel is. And I don't know, I could go into more depth if you like.
Well, let me try to sum it up, and you can tell me if I'm getting this right. So we're saying that Marcel and me have a channel, and then Norbert, you and me have a channel, but the two of you do not have a channel connected to each other. And so the next step would be you create a virtual channel through me, but it connects the two of you so you can operate just like you had a channel open. Is that correct?
Exactly.
And how fast is it to open and close the channel? How fast does that actually occur?
So it's also pretty much instant for the virtual channels. We are, in the end, still off-chain when we establish virtual channel connections. The only thing that is, again, happening in the dispute case when we have to go to layer 1 and resolve a dispute is when there's a little bit of delay, depending on the block processing and validation delay.
Right.
I think if I get it right, the virtual channel between me and Norbert already exists if we have this construct that you just outlined, and that's why opening up that virtual channel in the end is not really an issue, because we are already with you as the guy between us connected.
Right, because there's technically a pathway that connects all of us. So virtual channel is basically just connecting all those paths together.
Exactly.
So when you open, let me ask this though, like when you open the open and closing procedure for a virtual channel, at what point in time do I actually need to be online for that?
So you would like to be online in case of the dispute. So in the end, you still have to watch the chain somehow, but that holds for all users that have channels opened, which is basically a watchdog implementation that still has to run. So we can't alleviate it.
Right. So this is a little bit of a technical one. I apologize to the audience, but I'm too curious. I just got to know what the answer to this is. So if I help establish a channel between the two of you, and the channel's coming through me, the virtual channel, and then let's say it gets opened, and then I disappear forever. I'm never coming back online. What happens to your payment channel, the virtual channel that's been established there?
You can still close that. So of course, we first had to settle the virtual channel. There would be a period for you to submit a state with a specific distribution of the balances that occur between you and Marcel and you and me. And but if you're not available, it's basically what we tell the chain the balances are. So it's in your interest as the intermediary to not just disappear, but you could disappear and we would still be able to get our balances.
Okay, great. So yeah, it's been designed in a way that there's full recovery, even if I decided to do something stupid and completely disappear from the network. Yeah, so that's an important thing just for our users to understand. So let's keep going. Like, what is the current status of Perun? You said that there's now a framework available for developers. That's right. And what exactly is the functionality that's available today for the developers?
So today, using the Perun CKB backend and the Go Perun framework, you can build or set up payment channels between users, just as we described in the beginning. And this is basically the point or the status we're at right now.
All right, so they're able to just we're in the early days is what you're saying though, right? It's still developers can go out there, they can start working with it, they can start maybe integrating the early versions of payment channels into their dApps at this point.
Yes. So.
Exactly. Depends a little bit on what network you are. We are, of course, since we started on Ethereum, we are a little bit further on Ethereum, or much further, to be quite honest. But I think that, as we said, this is a leveled thing. It's a matter essentially of time until all of that functionality will be available to Nervos developers as well. So stay tuned. These things always go a little bit faster than I expect, so probably even faster than you expect. And yeah, if you're already creative and if you are already have an idea as to how to utilize Perun channels, there's a lot you can already do, and one of these things is reaching out, of course. Yeah, but you have to start with payment channels anyway, so that's a logical first step.
Right. So you said that the Ethereum implementation is a little bit ahead of where we are today. Where exactly is the Ethereum implementation?
I think we have everything that we outlined, right, Norbert?
So yeah, virtual channel support is also on Ethereum.
Yeah. So that means virtual channels, app channels. We are currently working on releasing the cross-chain channels as well there. Yeah. And that's not on Ethereum, but on every EVM compatible chain, which also means Godwoken. Right?
Oh, I think it's right. Oh, perfect. That's great. That's great to know. Yeah, I mean that is very interesting. That I didn't realize it was that far ahead. I actually thought that the cross-chain stuff was years into the future potentially, but it sounds like it's actually much closer. That's exciting. That's really exciting to hear. So with the Nervos solution right now, it's just payment on, and we're talking about CKB, of course, just layer one. That's just payment channels at this point, right?
Yes.
And what do you think? What's the next step for that? What would be the next feature that's added to that?
So The next logical step, or Marcel, you go ahead.
Sorry. No, go ahead. The next logical step.
The next logical step would be to support virtual channels on CKB, which would then pave the way for a network to be set up with Perun, and just reach more people and give even more ability to utilize channels across different depths.
Yeah,
right. And then I take it.
Integrating,
Oh,
sorry
please
if I may just add very briefly, integrating virtual channels really paves the way for having a real network. So from having an interesting gadget that you can have like peer-to-peer to an actual infrastructure on Nervos that can be used for payment. And I think that's why Norbert also said it's the next logical step, because this would add so much more utility to what we already have on Nervos.
Right, absolutely. So, and I imagine that the virtual channels is basically a requirement for the next step, which is with the cross-chain channels. Am I right?
We wouldn't really need virtual channels to get the cross-chain channels working.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, you could open up a channel between two chains. It just it would also benefit, of course, from virtual channels. But yeah, it's I as a developer, decentralist, right? I would like to connect as many people as possible using the technology. So that's why, or that is where the logical step comes from with the virtual channels.
Right.
Let me add to that. Cross-chain channels, in the sense that you can keep transacting back and forth, etc. I think just payment channels would not be enough for that. But performing trustless cross-chain swaps one at a time, for that, payment channels would also work, because the cross-chain protocol is a little bit more complicated than the mere payment channel framework. But I think that's a topic for a whole other episode.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, we're not going to go into the technical, the deep technicals today. But for any developers that are interested, would you say that is it ready to go at this point? Is the documentation all there? Should we be encouraging developers to look at it, or do you need more time on that?
We are in the final steps for the payment channels right now. So I would give us 2 more weeks. It would be nice.
All right. So about to turn the corner. It's right there. Okay. Yeah. So let's see. So with the solutions that are out today, I mean, it sounds like it's making some pretty rapid progress. Hopefully within the next, I don't know, what should I say? How long until you think that multi-chain aspect would be actually ready on CKB? Just, throw something out there. It doesn't have to be that accurate. We're not going to hold you to it. Don't worry about that.
Do you want to know that?
I want to know that. Yes, I want to know that.
No,
I want the multi-chain.
Does he want to answer and get pummeled by the CEO tomorrow, or is it me?
Who has more on the line, right?
Yeah,
they might be listening. If you're not supposed to say it, please don't. But I would very much like to know it.
I think, Norbert, you can give a very rough estimate as to when that's technologically feasible.
Feasible. Yeah. Let's be modest, okay? Because you always said I'm modest. Let's give it 2 years. It's very modest.
2 years. Okay. All right. That's fair. All right. Yeah. So a little ways off, but we're hoping for a little sooner on that, of course. But yeah, that's the most exciting part to me, because I really see that opening doors. I mean, this is one of those things where we started many years back. We started with Bitcoin. We started with a single chain. But since that, of course, the ecosystem has grown. The entire space has grown. We've seen tens of thousands of chains now emerge, many of them with their own unique qualities, their own niches that they're trying to fill. I took a little bit of a jab at some of the more centralized chains earlier on in the conversation, but I should say that there are use cases for that. There absolutely are use cases, completely valid, and that they're not going to disappear either. So how do you actually take advantage of all this is you have to build these types of interoperable frameworks, these types of protocols that are actually connecting everything. It doesn't make any sense otherwise, because you're going to have users all over the world interacting with different types of chains, doing different types of things. And ultimately, all of that is creating value. That's the key here, is creating value. And we are people in communities. We operate in societies that need to exchange our value with each other. It only makes sense for these types of solutions to be a key part of mass adoption in the future. So let's take a look at if there's any questions. It doesn't look like we got too much going on. I think we already answered it. What made you consider building a Nervos network? I see that question. I think we already answered that, though. But do you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, actually, we have a little bit of history together, I believe.
Do we?
I think even Norbert himself was part of that, right?
You have to elaborate a bit more.
Okay, I'm sorry. Then maybe I'm wrong. So actually, a long while back, I think that these ties were established between, I don't want to lie, but I want to say it's Jan and a former employee in the research in our research department, and I'm not sure how they got together, but at some point we had like this extended call that we refer to as the workshop a few years back, and we really we debated whether we can build Perun channels on Nervos. And back then we weren't actually sure, because the way we designed Perun back then was account-based blockchains, and so back then we said we are really interested, and I think you guys were really grateful for all of this nice communication and everything, and we said, okay, we're not exactly sure if we can do this UTXO stuff, if we can actually handle it. And then we gathered some experience, and I think not that long ago we got back in touch together, and you remembered us, we remembered you, of course. And once we were confident that we can actually deal with UTXO blockchains, I think Nervos was the first address where we went to, because we already knew you were a very, very cool team and a cool ecosystem. And that's actually how we got back together. I think it's almost a little bit romantic, especially since we're all so modest, right? Except for me in this podcast. Norbert really said, you guys have a great toolkit. We really are about security. I think like the ethoses were already aligned. We already knew each other, and that's actually how we got back to Nervos.
Oh, that's very interesting. I didn't realize. I had no idea that that relationship I was out there pre-existing before. So let's see. I just had a question and I fell right out of my head, unfortunately. So we're just going to have to go on without that, unfortunately, because I can't remember what it is. Did you guys, either of you, have anything else that you'd like to add to the conversation today before we wrap up? Because I think we still have 1 or 2 minutes if you want to add anything, and we've gone through all the questions at this point.
Just to reinforce, it's a breeze to work with Nervos or CKB as a developer. I had also a different experience with other, let's say, SDKs or toolkits. And it was a quite refreshing experience to be allowed to integrate a Perun backend for CKB.
Oh, interesting. Well, that is very positive to hear. Thank you for that. Definitely, we've been working on the SDKs, putting in a lot more work, because the first versions that came out, I don't think you would have been too happy with them, to be quite frank. So they're getting better. I think they still have a way to go, especially in the documentation, but I'm glad that you had a positive experience with that. I'm sure all the users out there who are aware of this program, believe me, they are, that we are making some good progress on that. So did I hear right? Are we the first UTXO blockchain that you guys are actually integrating with?
I think you're not the only one, but I think you were like the first project we started with.
Oh, great. Great. So there are more. That's good. That is good to hear, because we want to make sure that we're including those in there. Are you guys connected with the UTXO Alliance at all?
Not yet. I think we were suggested that we introduce ourselves very soon. However, in the recent weeks, we've been quite busy, and that's yeah. I hope we'll be connecting. If someone's already listening, hey, here we are. I hope we made a good first impression, and otherwise, you'll hear from us soon.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, Nervos, we definitely encourage multi-chain. So a lot of our users are familiar with the UTXO Alliance, and we of course encourage you guys to join up with that as well. Get connected with some of the other chains in the future, because this is what it's all about. This is what we want to make sure the entire world is connected here, as many chains as possible. So with that, let's go ahead and wrap up. Any final words from either of you that you'd like to leave with our listeners today?
So we talked a lot about different functionalities of Perun, and we also talked a lot about multi-chain. And these are actually only two sides of the different coin that we call true interoperability, right? I think there were the toughest times in the crypto space are behind us. I really want to encourage any aspiring project, any developer, reach out if you want to utilize Perun for any of the use cases, be it interoperability in terms of cross chains, or be it interoperability in terms of an application, payment, identity. I don't know, whatever cool use case you might come up with. We'd really love to hear from you guys. Thank you so much for the support so far. Thanks to you, Jordan, and to the entire Nervos Foundation. You guys have been supporting us big time. And looking forward to what the future brings. And as I said, the future is always much faster than we think or we expect.
Yeah, fantastic. Absolutely. I could not word that any better. Norbert, anything from you?
Just thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys, it's great having you on. Thank you so much for being here. For anybody who wants to follow either of you or Perun, what are the social channels that they should be following?
We are on LinkedIn. You'll find us under Polycrypt, and also on Twitter, Polycrypt _. My name is Marcel Kaiser. This is Norbert Dzikowski, and as he said, thank you for having us.
Yes, thanks you for being here. Oh yes, please.
Hit us up on Discord. So we also have a Discord server, and this is where most of the technical stuff is talked about. And also we, more often than not, are pretty responsive in the answers and support when trying to utilize Perun or one of our other products.
All right, good to know. And what we're going to do, we're going to put all of those links. Make sure that these end up in the YouTube description a little later on, so everybody can find, who needs to find them will be able to find them there. Okay, and with that said, thanks to the two of you for being here. Thanks to everybody for listening today. This is really interesting product for me personally. I'm really looking forward to the future of this. So thanks to everybody. All right, well, take care, everybody.